It is just past 3 in the afternoon on a Friday outside Jerusalem. The sky has been dark for 3 hours. Not storm dark. Not eclipse dark. Something else. The kind of dark that makes Roman soldiers stop talking. A young man stands close enough to the cross that he can hear the breathing of the dying man on it. His name is John. He is the only one of the 12 who came back. The others are scattered through the city, hiding in upper rooms, denying they ever met him, walking out toward Emmaus because they have nowhere else to go. 3 women are nearby. One of them is the dying man's mother. John is holding her arm. A jar of sour wine sits on the ground. Someone has tied a sponge to a hyssop branch, the same kind of branch the Israelites used to paint blood on their doorframes the night the angel of death passed over Egypt, and lifted it to the man's mouth. He takes the wine, and then he speaks. It is one word. It is not Hebrew. It is not Aramaic, the language he taught in, the language he prayed in, the language he had used 3 hours earlier when he asked his father why he had been forsaken. It is Greek, and John, standing close enough to hear it, never forgets it. He will carry it for 60 years across the Roman Empire. He will write it down in a gospel he sends to a city called Ephesus in his old age. And when he writes it, he will do something strange. Something so strange that scholars have argued about it for 2,000 years. He will not translate it. John translates everything else. When he writes the name Rabboni, he stops to tell you it means teacher. When he writes Golgotha, he stops to tell you it means the place of the skull. He translates Messias. He translates Cephas. He translates Bethesda. But the most important word in the entire Gospel of John, the last word the dying man ever spoke, he leaves in raw Greek. No translation. No footnote. Nothing. Why? Stay with me. Because the answer to that question changes everything you think you know about the cross. The word the dying man spoke was Tetelestai. Most Bibles translate it. It is finished. That translation is not wrong. It is just dangerously incomplete. This is not a story about a translation. This is not a story about a verse. This is not a story about a syllable. This is a story about one Greek word. A word stamped in red ink across receipts in marketplaces from Egypt to Asia Minor in the 1st century, that 2,000 years ago cancelled a debt you didn't know you owed. To understand what Jesus actually said, you have to understand what this one word meant to anyone listening that day. 5 different worlds collide in Tetelestai, and the first one, the one John knew best, because he lived in the middle of it, is a marketplace. Before we walk into that marketplace, you need to know something about Jesus' choice of word. Greek is a precise language. Jesus had at least 4 other words he could have used to say, "It is finished." 4 other words that would have been perfectly correct grammatically, and every one of them would have meant something different. He could have said power. That word means to cease, to stop, to quit. A runner says power when his legs give out. A scribe says power when his hand cramps. It is the word of exhaustion. He could have said lego. That word means to leave off, to desist, to walk away from a task. It is the word a man says when he gives up on something he started. He could have said syntilio. That word means to bring to an end because circumstances forced it. It is the word for a meeting that ended because the candle burned out. It is the word for a battle that stopped because the sun went down. He could have said katalia. That word means to dissolve, to destroy, to tear apart. It is the word a man says when his work has been demolished. Jesus did not say any of those. He said Tetelestai, from the root telio. And telio is the only word in the Greek language that means, and I want you to hear this carefully, completed a goal that was always the goal. Not exhausted, not quitting, not interrupted, not destroyed. Completed, on purpose, from the beginning. Here's what most people miss. Tetelestai is in the perfect tense. Greek has a tense that English does not really have. The perfect tense in Greek does not just say something happened in the past. It says something happened in the past, and the result of that thing is still standing right now. It is permanent. It is unrepeatable. It is finished, and it stays finished. When Jesus said Tetelestai, he was not saying it was finished. He was saying it has been finished, and it will be finished forever. That is the word. Now let's walk into the 5 worlds it carried. The first world is a marketplace in Ephesus. Picture a merchant named Demetrios, a real composite of thousands of merchants whose receipts we have actually dug up out of the sand. Demetrios sells dyed cloth. He owes a debt to a banker named Theodotos. The debt is 6 months old. Demetrios is afraid every time he hears footsteps outside his shop, because in the 1st century, an unpaid debt was not just a financial problem. It was a path to slavery. Roman law allowed creditors to seize the debtor's children if the debt was not paid. One morning, Demetrios brings the last coin. He counts it onto the table. Theodotos counts it back, and then Theodotos reaches into a drawer and pulls out the original loan document. A single sheet of papyrus called a keragraphon, which means handwritten note. And he takes a reed pen, dips it in red ink, and writes one word across the top: Tetelestai, paid in full. He hands the papyrus back to Demetrios. Demetrios can carry it with him if anyone ever questions the debt. If a tax collector comes, if a rival merchant accuses him, if his own memory starts to light him at 3 in the morning, he holds up the paper. Tetelestai. The debt is closed. The debt cannot be reopened. The debt is dead. That was the word stamped on every paid-off invoice in Ephesus. That was the word John saw every day for the rest of his life. And when the Apostle Paul writes to a church in Colossae 30 years after the cross, listen to what he says. He says that God took the keragraphon, the handwritten note of debt that stood against us, and he nailed it to the cross. Paul is not being poetic. Paul is being literal. He is using the actual Greek word for the actual loan document, and he is telling you that the loan document with your name on it was the thing Jesus hung on with his own body. That is layer 1. But it gets stranger, because the second world Tetelestai lived in was not a marketplace. It was an army. A Roman legionary in the 1st century was sent on long missions. He might be sent to put down a revolt in Britannia. He might be sent to escort a tax collector through Judea. He might be sent to deliver a sealed message to a governor in Antioch. And when his mission was done, he came back to his commander and gave a report. The word he used to begin that report was a form of telio, Tetelestai, mission accomplished. Orders fulfilled. Now turn to John chapter 17. This is the night before the cross. Jesus is praying out loud, and his disciples are listening. He says to his Father, and I am translating this directly from the Greek. I have glorified you on earth, having completed the work you gave me to do. The word he uses for completed is teleosis. Same root, same family, same idea. Jesus is a son under orders. The orders were given before the foundation of the world. And on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, 18 hours after that prayer, he files his final report. Tetelestai. The orders are fulfilled. The Father can call him home. Pay attention to this, because the third world is the one that should stop you cold. 600 meters from the cross, at the exact same hour Jesus was dying, the high priest of Israel was in the temple. His name was Caiaphas. He was the man who had orchestrated the trial. He was the man who had said it was better for one man to die for the people. And on this Friday afternoon, while Jesus was hanging on a Roman cross, Caiaphas was preparing the Passover lambs. The ritual was old. The priest would take the lamb. He would inspect it for blemishes, for cuts, for broken bones, for sickness, for any flaw that would make it unacceptable as a sacrifice. And when the lamb passed the inspection, the priest would pronounce one Greek word over it, a word from the same root family as Tetelestai. He would say teleos, perfect, complete, without blemish, acceptable. Caiaphas was inspecting lambs. He did not know that the real lamb was on a hill outside his window. He did not know that the sacrifice he was performing was being ended forever in the same breath. He was holding a knife over the wrong lamb. He thought he was finishing a ritual. He was actually ending one, for good, and there are still 2 more worlds in this word. If you are still here, You already know this is going somewhere. 3 layers down. 2 to go. A receipt, a soldier, a lamb, and the next 2 will change the way you read the cross for the rest of your life. I promise you that. Before we get there, if this video is doing something to you, do me one favor. Hit subscribe. Tell someone in the comments which layer hit you the hardest so far. I read every one. It matters more than you think. Now, back to the word, because the fourth world Tetelestai lived in was not a marketplace, and not an army, and not a temple. It was a studio. Imagine a painter in a portico in Corinth in the 1st century. He has been working on the same canvas for 11 months. A wealthy patron commissioned it. The light is failing on a Tuesday afternoon. His apprentice is standing behind him with a fresh brush and a clean pot of pigment, waiting for orders. The painter looks at the work. He looks at it for a long time. Then he sets the brush down. He says one word to the apprentice. Tetelestai. The apprentice does not understand at first. The light is good for another hour. There is pigment left. There is canvas left. Why stop? Because the painter is not stopping out of exhaustion. He is not stopping out of frustration. He is stopping because there is nothing left to add. One more stroke would not improve the work. One more stroke would damage it. The work is complete, not because the day ran out, because the goal was reached. Here is the part nobody tells you. Jesus did not die because he ran out of strength. Jesus did not die because the soldiers killed him. Jesus did not die because his plan collapsed. Read the Gospel of John carefully. John tells you twice, once in chapter 10 and once in chapter 19, that nobody takes Jesus' life from him. He lays it down on his own. When the work is done, the painter sets down the brush. The son bows his head. Tetelestai. There is nothing left to add. One more breath would not improve the work. The work is complete. And then there is the 5th world. A man is sitting in a Roman holding cell. He has been there for months. He does not know if he will die in this cell or be released into the streets. His family does not know either. His wife brings food to the gate every 3rd day and waits to hear if he is still alive. One morning a guard opens the cell door. He hands the man a small piece of papyrus. The papyrus has one word written across it in dark ink, Tetelestai. It means the sentence has been served. The penalty has been paid. The case is closed and cannot be reopened. The man walks out into the sunlight a free man, with the paper still in his hand, because if anyone ever questions whether he is allowed to be free, he holds it up. Tetelestai. The matter is settled. Now put that paper next to the cross. Paul writes to the church in Colossae and tells them that God took the record of debt that stood against us, every charge, every sentence, every accusation, and he nailed it to the cross. Not crumpled it, not erased it, nailed it to the wood with the body of his son. That is layer 5, a receipt, a soldier, a lamb, a painting, a prisoner walking free, all in one word. And here is where it gets remarkable. For most of church history, scholars knew Tetelestai mostly from the Bible itself. They knew the root, they knew the grammar. They did not know how ordinary people used it. Then, in 1908, a German Lutheran scholar named Adolf Deissmann published a book that changed everything. Deissmann had spent years digging through crates of papyri that archaeologists had pulled out of the Egyptian sand and out of the ruins of Pompeii. Tax receipts, bills of sale, loan documents, discharge papers, ordinary trash that ordinary people had thrown away 2,000 years ago and that the dry desert had preserved. He was reading a tax receipt by lamplight when he saw it. And then he kept seeing the same word, Tetelestai, stamped in red ink across the top of receipts, written in dark reed pen ink across the bottom of loan documents, marked on the corners of tax records. Tens of thousands of pieces of papyrus. One word, over and over. He paid, paid, E-L-O-E. Paid. Deissmann realized something that no commentator had said clearly before. When Jesus said Tetelestai, he was not coining a theological term. He was using the most common business word in the Eastern Roman Empire. He was using a word that every shopkeeper, every dock worker, every freed slave, every widow with a tax bill knew by sight. He was using the word stamped on cancelled debts. He was speaking the language of the marketplace. From the cross, and the word was for everyone who had ever owed anything. But you cannot understand the weight of that word without understanding what the cross actually was. A Roman politician named Cicero wrote about crucifixion almost 100 years before Jesus. Cicero was not a Christian. Cicero did not care about Jesus. Cicero hated crucifixion as a Roman on Roman terms. He wrote that to bind a Roman citizen was a crime, to beat one was an abomination, to kill one was almost murder, and to crucify one. Cicero said there was no word in the Latin language vile enough to describe it. Roman law forbade crucifying Roman citizens. The death was so degrading that the empire reserved it for slaves, traitors, and conquered peoples. The historian Josephus tells us that during the siege of Jerusalem in the year 70, the Romans crucified up to 500 people a day outside the city walls. He says they ran out of wood for crosses. He says they ran out of room for bodies. That was the death, and from inside that death, from a body so beaten the prophet Isaiah said his appearance was marred beyond recognition, from a mouth so dry he had asked for sour wine, from lungs collapsing because of the way crucifixion kills. Jesus did not whisper. Jesus did not groan. The Gospel of John says he spoke with a voice loud enough that John heard it clearly enough to remember it for 60 years. Tetelestai. It was not the sound of a man dying. It was the sound of a man winning. There is one more thing. Go back to the beginning of this video. I told you that John never translated the word. Of every other foreign word in his Gospel, he stopped and explained. Rabboni means teacher. Golgotha means the place of the skull. Bethesda, Cephas, Messias. All translated, but the last word of Jesus. The word he carried in his memory for 60 years. He left in raw Greek. Now you know why. John wrote his Gospel from a city called Ephesus. He was an old man by then, somewhere in his 80s, the last living apostle, the only one of the 12 who had not been killed. He was writing to people who lived in that city, people who walked past the merchants' stalls every morning, people who picked up loaf bread and clay oil and dyed wool and handed over coins, and when their account was settled, the merchant stamped one Greek word on the receipt before handing it back. Tetelestai. His readers had been reading that word on cancelled debts their entire lives. They saw it on their tax receipts. They saw it on their rent papers. They saw it on the manumission documents that freed their slaves. They saw it pressed into wax seals on their letters of credit. John did not translate it because they did not need it translated. They already knew exactly what it meant. He just needed to tell them where Jesus said it. And there is a second beat to this. And I want you to hold on to it because it is one of the most powerful details in the entire New Testament. John is the only gospel writer who records this word. Read Mark. Mark says Jesus uttered a loud cry. Read Matthew. Matthew says he cried out again with a loud voice. Read Luke. Luke gives you the prayer about committing his spirit to the Father. 3 Gospels. 3 different ways of saying he made a sound, but none of them tell you the word. Only John. Because Mark was not there. Matthew was not there. Luke was a historian writing decades later from interviews. The other disciples had run. Peter had denied him 3 times before the rooster crowed and was somewhere in the city hiding. The 12 had scattered. Only one of them came back. John alone stood at the foot of the cross. He was the one Jesus looked down at when he said, "Behold your mother." He was holding Mary's arm. He was close enough to hear breathing. And when Jesus spoke, John did not hear a loud cry. He heard a word. One word. In Greek, the word stamped on every paid-off debt in the empire he would later carry the gospel into. He carried that one word for 60 years, across persecution, across exile, across the deaths of every other apostle. He carried it to Ephesus, and when he finally wrote it down, when his hand finally pressed reed to papyrus, he did not translate it, because his readers already knew. Now I want you to stop for a moment. Imagine there is a knock at your door. You walk to the door. You open it. There is a man standing there with a folder. You have been afraid of a knock like this for a long time. There is a debt. Maybe it is a literal one. Maybe it is something you said to someone 20 years ago that you have never apologized for. Maybe it is a habit you cannot break and you do not know how to tell anyone about it. Maybe it is the version of yourself you swore you would not become and you became anyway. The debt has a shape. You know exactly what shape it is. It sits on your chest at 3 in the morning when you cannot sleep. The man at the door reaches into the folder. He pulls out one piece of paper. He hands it to you, and across the top of the paper, in red ink, is one word: "Be paid." You stare at it. You ask him, "Who paid this?" He shakes his head. He says, "That is not your concern." Not anymore. The collector is not coming back. That is what Tetelestai means. Tetelestai is not the word of a man giving up. Tetelestai is not the word of a man worn out. Tetelestai is not the word of a man whose plan fell apart. Tetelestai is the word of a man who finished what he started before the world began. And here is the grammatical detail that will land this whole word in your chest for the rest of your life. The Greek perfect tense. Greek has a tense that English does not really have. The perfect tense means something happened in the past, and the result of that thing keeps standing right now. It does not unmake itself. It does not expire. It does not need to be repeated. It is permanent. He did not say it was finished. He said it has been finished, and it stays finished forever. The debt that was nailed to that cross will never be uncrumpled. The record that stood against you will never be reissued. The sentence served will never be charged again. The lamb declared perfect will never be re-inspected. The painting finished will never be retouched. The orders fulfilled will never be returned to the field. Now watch what happens next. 3 takeaways before you close this video. Stay with me to the end. The third one is the one I want you to carry with you. Takeaway 1. Tetelestai is not a translation problem. Tetelestai is a word with 5 worlds inside it. A receipt in a marketplace, a report from a soldier, a lamb on the altar, a painting in a studio, a prisoner walking free. Jesus chose this word out of at least 4 others he could have used, because every one of those 5 worlds was nailed shut in the same breath. The merchant of Ephesus, the legionary returning from the field, the high priest in the temple, the painter in the portico, the prisoner stepping into the sunlight, all of them in one word from a Roman cross. Takeaway 2. The Greek perfect tense means the work is not just finished, it stays finished. There is no sin you can drag here that has not already been nailed to this cross. There is no failure you can carry up to it that the body of Jesus did not already cover. There is no apology you owe, no regret you cannot let go of, no shame that sits on your chest in the dark. That has not already been stamped paid in red ink 2,000 years ago. You do not have to finish what Christ finished. You only have to receive what he finished. Takeaway 3. And this is the one. Somewhere right now, you are carrying a debt. You know exactly what it is. You know exactly what shape it has. Maybe you have never said it out loud. Maybe you have never written it down. Maybe you are the only one in the world who knows it is there. It wakes you up at 3 in the morning. It sits on your chest when the house is quiet. You have been afraid of a knock at the door for a long time. 2,000 years ago, on a Roman cross outside a city called Jerusalem, a dying man took one final breath of sour air, and he spoke one word in a language his mother did not even speak. He spoke it loud enough for one disciple to hear it. He spoke it clear enough for that disciple to carry it across an empire for 60 years, and across the parchment of your life, across every charge, every failure, every name you have ever called yourself in the dark. That same word was stamped in red ink, paid in full. The collector is not coming back. So tell me in the comments, which of the 5 worlds hit you the hardest? Was it the receipt, the soldier, the lamb, the painting, or the prisoner walking free? I read every comment. I want to hear yours. If this video gave you something today, share it with one person who needs to hear it. That is how this word still travels. 2,000 years ago, a dying man on a Roman cross did not say it was finished. He said it has been finished, and it stays finished forever.